Okay, we will convene this regular meeting of the Kerrville City Council on Tuesday, October the 24th at 6 p.m. Please make sure that your cell phones are turned to an off position, and we will begin by the invocation offered by Mayor Pro Tem George BAROODY, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Chief Knight. You may stand if you wish.
Dear Lord, thank you for this beautiful day, and especially at this time of year for the reminder of why we all choose to live here in this beautiful city. Help us to be wise in what we're supposed to be doing here tonight, and not so much focused on ourselves or even the city, but to focus on you and what you would have us do. Help us to always, as we go through these days, to reflect the light of you on everything we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen, for getting us started this evening. Item number 1 is announcements of community interest. Announcement of items of community interest, including expressions of thanks, congratulations, or condolences. Stu?
Sure, thank you. Got a much smaller group here tonight. I just have a couple of things that I want to follow up with since our last meeting, and of course the first is the Chalk Festival. I don't know how many people in here went to that. Anybody else go? Was that a great event or what? Absolutely fantastic. We went down there every day, and this year's event packed downtown for 2 days. Pretty much kept our downtown businesses filled with lots of people. And of course, as you can see, the artwork was absolutely amazing. I love that top right one there. Love those colors and everything about it. And I want to give a kudo to top right there is a former classmate of my son's. That's Clara Keene. That's Robert Earl Keene's daughter. I mean, yeah, she's a fantastic artist. That's her picture just below her on the right. And of course, on the left there, that's Mike Hayes last Saturday after UT lost another game. Had a break. And I did say another one, unfortunately. All right, let's go on. We had Saturday at the library. We had a 20th anniversary of the original Harry Potter book, and Harry Potter showed up, as you can see on the left there. And this was a great event, just another terrific thing that our library does. They do something every month, and absolutely fantastic. And finally, let's move to next week, because this is going to be a fun thing, and I encourage everybody to come by. We've got some pictures here from last year's event. This is the Family Fright Night. Now, this year it's moving from Kerrville Shriner Park to Louise Hayes Park. Festivities begin at 5:30 p.m. They include trick-or-treating, games, a costume contest, food vendors, bounce houses, and more. And this is a free event. And all I can say about it is that I'm really glad that I don't have to judge the costume contests, because as you can see, we have some very, very talented people here in Kerrville. All right, thank you very much.
Anybody else have any announcements from council or from the audience?
I have a couple, Mayor.
Okay.
The farmers market, the Kerrville's farmers market, first Friday of December, is looking for a Santa Claus, if anybody would like to do that. And also, I've been talking with the gentleman that came by for My Ride Texas, the rideshare company. They just did interview for drivers last week, and they should be online next week. And also invited them to the Recovery Community Coalition meeting to discuss the process to see how they can help.
Great. And when's your next recovery meeting?
November 27th.
Okay, very good. Anything else? If not, we will move to item number 3, which is the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to have any items removed? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. Item number 4A is the second public hearing, annexation into the incorporated limits and applying a zoning classification of District 26E for an approximate 7.95 acre tract out of land adjacent to the incorporated limits, which is out of the F. Rodriguez Survey number 72, abstract number 280, Kerr County, Texas, located at 5263 Highway 27. Ms. Kunzel, is there anything we need to add to this from last time?
Did I recuse myself?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We need to have a recusal before the discussion. And remind me to bring him back in. He's a nice kid. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, ma'am, I have nothing to add other than to point out that this is the second of your public hearings. There is no action that is required this evening, and just to show you where we are in the process here. And then we have the first reading and the second reading before the end of the year, and that's all I have.
Okay. Are there any questions by council? In the public hearing at 6:06 p.m., is there anybody from the public that wishes to ask a question or have any comments about this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 6:06. There's no action required on this item, and as Ms. Kunzel mentioned, we'll see that for a vote, I believe, on the next agenda. Okay. Item number 5A is to bring our young man back in here. So quiet. Okay, now, item number 5A is ordinance number 2017-19, a zoning change to amend ordinance number 2004-15, which created a planned development district for an approximate 536-acre tract of land out of the Walter Fosgate Survey number 120 within the city of Kerrville, Kerr County, Texas, generally located southeast of the intersection of Farm to Market Road 783, which is Harper Highway and Interstate 10. Said amendment to adjust the authorized uses between two defined areas within said district, said areas located adjacent to and north of Holsworth Drive. Ms. Kunzel?
Yes, ordinarily with second readings, when there have been no questions or concerns, we place a second reading on a rezoning on your consent agenda, but we place this item on your regular agenda because there were several questions that you had that we have tried to clear up since then. So at this point, I would just entertain any remaining questions that you might have on this item.
Okay, any questions by council?
I guess I got some comments and halfway questions, but so we're actually trying to do two things. I mean, I've already spoken to Ms. Kunzel and Mr. Hayes about some of this, so I'm sort of leading in my questions. So we got two things that we're trying to do here. One is in that 1C that's on there, we're adding the permitted use of hotel motel, and the other one is to add fuel sales to 4C. And so my questions really aren't going to be about the hotel motel one. It's more just about the fuel sales. And in talking with them, the original planned development district stipulated, number one, that there would be no fuel sales in 4C, right? So that's the first thing. And then it also added that in 1C, so the map that's up there, this is what they have up there, right? Okay. So the lower fuel sales was allowed in 1C with the added stipulation that no fuel sales would be done within 300 feet of the northwest corner of 1C as measured perpendicularly from that road. So the northwest corner is, if you're looking at the map, it's the kind of the lower right little point that meets up with 4C, if everybody understands that. So you go 300 feet towards the number 1C, and you're not allowed to have any fuel sales within there. It seems somewhat clear to me. It's not crystal clear, so I can appreciate that, but it seems like the goal wasn't, I mean, there's nothing special about that particular point where 4C and 1C meet, so it seems like they're really trying to get at distance from Town Creek, or a safety buffer from Town Creek for fuel sales. Because the other thing that's in this original PD is the area 2C, which I guess is to the right of 1C, was only allowed to have fuel sales in its upper left corner, which again puts it a certain distance away from Town Creek. So it seems like they're trying to save that there. So what I would like to see us do here, if we're allowed to do this, is consider approving this with just the hotel change and not the fuel sales change until, if and until we can get staff to come back with sort of, I don't know, lack of a better term, environmental impact sort of study on fuel sales and what's common practice these days. Because the reality is, if we move forward with it as written, fuel sales can occur way down in that lower point of 4C, which is pretty darn close to the town creek. And I would just like to see us maybe consider doing that. Now, I asked Mr. Hayes earlier, but just to confirm, with the agenda item as it is, am I allowed to would we be allowed to sort of split it apart?
You could do that. I mean, that could be part of your motion to approve it.
Does it make it so that if I was to split it apart, if we were to vote to split it apart, and the study comes back saying, all good, clean bill of health, do we have to go through posting in 2 readings to make that fuel sales aspect of things?
You would, because at that point you'd be doing a zoning change.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's kind of my comments and the reason I would be wanting us to consider that. So,
Has there been a study done before, or?
What's our typical setback from a stream for a gas station?
Well, actually, there is a setback restriction that I found that is in the gas station section. What happened historically was in 2001, this group started talking about this particular tract. In 2004 is when the PD amendment, or the PD was wrote some restrictions for setback in there. Several years later, in 2011, the gas station ordinance was approved by the council, which does have a 100-foot distance from the floodplain. Something that also occurred, which Councilmember BAROODY, I did not have this information earlier when we met, but when you look at the green belt that is adjacent to 4C, I believe that was also a consideration at the time. That area was also floodplain at that time in 2004. Today, that is no longer shown as 100-year floodplain. So that distance, the restriction there is not as limited today as it was a few years ago. But there is a 100-foot distance from the 100-year floodplain that is currently on the books in the PD section of the zoning ordinance.
Even down to the point of 4C, it's 100 feet from the flood.
Floodplain, yes, ma'am.
Do we have a map showing the floodplain?
I don't with me, but I can. We do.
So what I'm going to give out to you right now is the current floodplain, and you'll see just a small portion of this is actually basically that little tail, and what all.
the tail is
So
in it.
it is in
So
4C.
let me get this is the old one coming down. This is the 2011 map.
Mhm.
That's our current. And now what we have coming to you is, as you can see, it's labeled on here is historic. The Zone X finger kind of in the middle of the page was the current conditions as part of this PD.
Was that the green belt?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
And so we just found this earlier, so that's very good.
Mayor, I don't know if you all want to hear from the applicant, but their engineer is here tonight as well. And John, I don't know if you want to comment on that or not.
Well, first of all, Councilman, did that answer your floodplain question?
Yes, that is just.
Good evening. My name is John Hewitt. I was going to add that we feel like we're significant distance away from Town Creek. But if the council feels like this is a big environmental concern with a gas station at this location, I think the developer would be willing to drop his request for fuel sales on Tract 4C if you feel like it's a big concern for you.
Well, I know we did travel down there. I did, and it is, when you are actually on site, even though this may be partially out, it does drain so directly, you know, towards the creek. And I don't know if it would change the development plans for this to be put over in 1C, or if that's possible, or if there's still room to put it somewhere in 4C that wouldn't be a drainage issue. We talked about it last time, and in last meeting, and the consensus was that there would be enough care in the development process taken that remediation could be made. But if there's another study, I'm kind of out there on that we might look at, and if they're willing not to.
See, my feeling would be because my thing isn't so much to say no to it, but to go along with what you said, my feeling would be I don't like the idea of just checking the box and saying that's okay, because the other part of the ordinance still wouldn't be satisfied from what I'm seeing. So my suggestion would be, if they're willing to forego that for right now, then I would say we act that way. And if they wish to come back and change that, I would say that we should change a different part of this ordinance as well. The fuel sales paragraph that at least council is aware of what we're talking about, that describes this distance thing. I would say if they're gonna try and have fuel sales done in that spot, we should be addressing that at P&Z also. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think planning and zoning had this information.
No, they didn't, but I'm just, so that kind of helps me satisfied.
Would fuel
John-
cells, I'm sorry, would fuel cells still be permissible in 1C? Yes.
Yeah, they
that
always
was the
were.
old
That
thing.
always was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Always was.
so that,
Do you expect them to come back and ask for that change at a later time?
They don't have any prospective buyers. It was just the flexibility that they wanted to allow on it. So, there's no issue on that.
So the possibility would be if they had some gas station want to buy that land.
Correct. But there's no plans
then
for
they
that
could
right
come
now.
and see.
Mayor, Council, I spoke with both EPA and TCQ about this issue because as our current ordinance states, we do not require an environmental impact for gas stations. However, prior to development or construction commencement, they have to submit to the EPA, I'm going to try to get this correctly, SPCC rule. And basically what it is a spill prevention plan has to be approved by the EPA even before the TCEQ gets involved. So pre-construction, that all has to be approved by EPA. TCEQ doesn't get involved until they issue the notice for construction, and then they do yearly inspections, making sure that there's an on-site supervisor. They have their separate regulations, but as far as any environmental study, that would be something that the city would have to impose because that's not something that EPA or TCEQ is going to require.
well, if they came back and said that they can make it work, TCEQ, if they came back and said it wouldn't work, then we've made this motion for nothing. But I don't know how much extra work we're doing if we do it twice. If we come back to amend it twice, but I'm willing to do that if the applicant's willing to go ahead with 1C
That's
and
what
approve that
yeah.
for the switch.
Could I just ask one more
Yes,
question?
ma'am.
I just want to understand what you told us. Make sure I've got this straight. So if at some future time, Mobil came and said, we want to build a gas station at 4C, and the owner was willing to sell them the land, then they would have to go through this spill prevention thing.
Correct.
With EPA.
With the EPA.
Before they ever constructed it.
That is correct.
And then TCEQ would make sure that they lived up to,
TCEQ, from what I've gathered talking to the two agencies today, is more of the enforcement
Right.
once it's constructed. EPA is prevention and basically how do we fix it if it does occur.
right.
And so really once they bless that plan, approve it, they're done.
And of course, we would have had another chance to make sure that all these restrictions that we had in there originally could
Yes, ma'am.
be enforced, including a distance thing.
Right,
We
I mean,
decided that 100 was not conservative
yeah,
enough.
my thing wasn't so much that we should or shouldn't be applying it as much as it's in place. So if we were gonna move forward, then we should correct that
Mhm.
in the PDD.
And we could.
Yeah, that's
and we
that's
could.
all I'm saying.
So it sounds like there's a good, sensible way forward if we split this tonight and
Right.
just approve the 1C change.
Yep.
I would, well, we've had our questions and comments. Are there any I don't have any speaker request forms, but would anyone else like to speak or have questions? If not, I would entertain.
Mayor, I got one more
yes.
question. It's for Sabina. On track 1C, the 26 acres looks like it extends into 4R. Is that not going to be an issue here? Is that just going to be all 1C now?
Well, certainly there's a small piece of additional property that is now shown in Tract 1C. It's not platted yet, but to me, it is still in compliance with the original plan for the PD. Now, are there implications for the residential area behind it as far as having less area to develop and coming back through the process, back through the PD process, back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then this council in the future, quite likely.
So the 4R that goes into the 26 acres will be 1C now? That plat that I sent you, or that drawing that I sent you, I overlaid the two maps?
A small portion of what used to be in the R area would be incorporated into the 1C
1C, okay.
in terms of use.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I ask Mr. Hewitt a question on that? Just basically, because this came up when I was discussing with Sabina earlier. If you're familiar with what Mr. Volk was talking about, the little slither that's, okay, in the plans that are being looked at by your client, are they talking about the hotel being in that 4R slither?
They don't know. It's
Okay, all right.
completely conceptual at this
Okay,
point.
all right, I just wondered. Okay.
Okay. Then, Mr. Brody, if your idea, would you like to make a motion to that
Sure.
effect?
I'll make a motion to amend the PDO 4-15 by adopting a modified ordinance 2017-19 to only add hotel motel as a permitted use to the subzone 1C.
Does that suffice, Mr. Hayes?
Well, I was trying to follow this. So if you go,
We have to amend ordinance number 2017-19 is what we need to do.
yes, ma'am. If you, so section 1 would remain, and we're just not going to deal with fuel sales at all. That'll be
Right,
deleted.
we're just putting a
Leave
P
it
in
as
the
is.
1C
In 1C.
for hotel motel.
Right, so you'll just have that section 1 that deals with the zoning, and that's it.
Correct.
And kind of boilerplate language, which gets me back to Councilmember Vogel's question about the areas. This ordinance is not doing anything with the area. I want to make sure that's clear. You know, as you were getting a response to that, I was looking, trying to remember what the ordinance was doing. It's not doing anything with the area. The areas were concepts, not divided, not meets and bounds, no platting. So the only thing you're doing, based upon Councilmember Baroody's motion, is you're going to add hotel to 1C, and that's it.
Okay.
The 26.64 acres was just kind of a, I was trying to figure out why we even added that, but that was just to give you some sort of concept of that size of the acres, even though it arguably, based on your map, goes outside of those two areas.
Okay.
So as my motion was made, that little slither of 4R is gonna remain 4R?
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Which gets you to what
So
you were
what we're
asking,
really
right?
doing is amending section 2.7
Right,
to take the words "and 4C" out.
that's right.
Correct.
Yes, right.
Okay, are we all clear?
That's a clear motion, we did that?
Do we have a second?
Okay.
Yes, we have a motion.
Did you
We
get
have a
the
second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much. Item 5B, ordinance number 2017-20, amending the budget for fiscal year 2017 to account for the transfer of funds between different funds as previously authorized by City Council to account for the proceeds from the sale of the former City Hall property and other amendments as provided herein. And Ms. Yarborough gave a very good overview of those last time. Are there no changes from you?
There have not been any changes since the last time.
And again, it's a second reading to approve the changes. Any questions by council or any member? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve on the second reading.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson, do we have a second?
Seconded.
And a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. Item number 6A is resolution number 42-2017, authorizing a waiver of various fees associated with construction activities for property located at 602 Spur 100 within the city of Kerrville, Texas. This was submitted by citizen Steve Volkman. Are you here? Mr. Volkman is not here, and I have suggested that we defer this, council, until he is, in case you have any questions. Is that okay? He was wanting to amend it to defer the fees, but there may be some questions.
Is there any time pressure on him? Do we know that he's fixing to start this and he needs to?
Some of this is actually on a reimbursement basis, so they've already begun to do some work. So given the amount, I'm not sure that's an issue, but with him not here tonight, we just don't know, because this is an agenda bill that was submitted by a resident
By
as
a
opposed
resident,
to.
right. And is 860 a good estimate, or is that his number or our number?
That's our
Our
estimate.
Okay, okay.
And again, we could do this, but I hate to do it without the applicant here in case questions or comments arise. So we can notify him, I suppose, that we will set this for another agenda. Okay? Is that a consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Sure.
Item number 6B then is interim administrative services contract between City of Kerrville, Texas and the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation, amount of $16,700. Mr. Hoppers?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight, you do have an administrative services contract with the EIC. This is an item that was budgeted both within the EIC budget as well as the city budget for $100,000. Which has been the case since 2011. The current contract expired on September 30th of 2017, and so that necessitates a new contract for this fiscal year. We did bring this item to the EIC at their last regular meeting. They slightly amended the proposed contract and basically proposed a 60-day interim contract to take care of an issue that they have asked for to be included, which we've not drafted yet, but essentially would, it's clarification in regards to legal services, and then the ability, they had questions about the ability within the budget item to be able to provide for outside legal services. If you happen to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I think the only amendment, I looked at the previous, and I think council has previous agreement, and the only addition I think we have is on B, other than the price and the term, to allow in section Article 1B, the city attorney can contract at times for specialized legal services with respect to a project approved by EIC and EIC agrees to pay. This was added, was this their request, Mr. Hayes, or yours, or? I know it's something we've done.
Right, and during the discussion, they kind of raised the issue, and so I just added it to address that.
Okay.
Okay, and can I add something to that? Basically, the change that you've got in front of you is sort of an add-on for this interim agreement, but what they being me, because I was on EIC, were seemingly asking for was the option down the road is, so the city attorney is the attorney of record for the city council, is also for EIC. If there's some sort of a conflict between the two, they seem to be concerned that they'd be left without legal counsel. And the suggestion was, I guess that contract gives them the authority to go hire outside counsel, but because the city approves or denies all expenditures, they have the authority to go try and get council, but city council actually has the ultimate authority to say, you know what, no. Okay, so one way around that, and this isn't for this agenda item, but it's more direction for the ensuing contract.
Yes, sir.
Would be possibly to, you know, I talked to Mr. Hayes about this a little bit, but to either add in the contract something that says sort of an explicit amount of money that the council will pre-approve to be spent on outside attorneys, legal fees, or leave the contract alone and send back with some sort of you know, actually amend their budget to put a line item in there for the same thing. So we're essentially pre-approving some amount that they could do for outside legal fees in the event that there's some conflict. That way that gets them past the whole needing council to approve it at the time there's the conflict, you know. So I'm not suggesting we change this in front of us. This is just the interim, but I guess I'm saying maybe we're sending direction back to when you're drafting it to kind of pick one of those two options maybe.
Do you think it's likely that if we get our contract with our city attorney resolved, that this concern will go away?
Not the way they expressed it, because the truly what they were expressing was in the event that there's a conflict between whoever's in that chair, so he's the attorney for both bodies, so they were saying if there's a conflict he can't, you know, he's going to side with city council if there's actually a conflict. So they were wanting the ability to get outside counsel separate from him at that option.
And again, would this
seems to make sense.
Would this be an addition, because I listened to the meeting and I know that Mr. Hoppy, you said in answer to their question, how much do you think if we separated out all the administrative services, and for those that are here today, it's $100,000 has traditionally been the administrative services fee, and that's for all of finance, and that's for all
engineering,
of engineering,
administration,
that's for everyone, clerical, everything, and that's a pretty good deal. And so I think the discussion ensued. They already have money in the budget to, and with this that Mr. Hayes added, if they want extra outside special legal services, which Mr. Hayes said he's contracted with before, in other words, to prepare an agreement or something that may be a complicated type thing, then that's already there to do. So it was difficult for him, Mr. Hoppy said, to estimate what average everyday legal services would be if you break that out, because some years may be more complicated than others. Some years you have more agreements you have to negotiate than others. So it was not a clear.
The issue there was what's in that interim contract is saying that that's EIC money. So it's not actually Mr. Hayes doing it. So
correct.
He doesn't have the authority to spend their budget. He has that's giving him the authority to go out and get it. Yes. EIC has to pay for it. Yes. So they're still unapproved for that expenditure. So we'd have to somehow accommodate that. Am I right? I mean, as far as if it's left alone as it is, you could go out and get some outside counsel for them. You could go, you know, identify somebody, but the actual expenditure of it, which is going to come out of EIC, has not officially been approved at that moment, right?
Correct.
So we'd have to pre-approve it or something.
Yeah. Well, I think right now that's good recommendation for going forward. But right now we just want to get the 60-day so that they can go on with their meetings.
Yeah.
Their next meeting is November 20, and then this agreement would be brought back to our December meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Staff will work on getting those comments drafted up and get it back in front of both groups.
And they may have some additional things to say too. Okay. Any more questions, comments by council? Good questions. Can I get a motion to approve this?
I would move to approve the 60-day extension.
Okay. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. All right. Item number 7A is presentation of the Office of Innovation. And it looks like we have an introduction here by Mr. McDaniel in order.
Yes, ma'am, we do. Thank you. Well, it's exciting to be here in front of you to talk about this project, this program, this office. We've been talking about it for some time. I know that even all the way back to my interview with the council, we were talking about some of the things that I might be able to bring to the table, and was very fortunate enough to steal Mr. Garcia out of Dallas to come and join us. And he has just really gotten started on all this in a very big way. And that's what we want to talk to you about tonight. I want to thank him, and I also want to thank the city staff for embracing what we're trying to do here. I'm going to start off with a few comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Garcia. This is just a photo of the door into the City University, which is located on the second floor of the Cancer Center, and you can enter it off of the parking garage. This is a depiction of how we're trying to bring it all together and trying to make sense of what we're doing here. So this is really our internal strategic plan to try to execute the work of the council and execute the work of the comprehensive plan that you'll see in a moment as Guillermo goes through the rest of the presentation. But what you can see here in the green, for example, are strategic focus areas, what I've been calling my 3 E's. And down the left-hand corner is empowerment of employees. And so that's what this is really all about, tonight's presentation with the Office of Innovation. Around the perimeter are the Baldrige criteria, which is going to drive our business planning. And then we've got core values in the center there as standards, tone, expectations, and pace, which I've been talking to my leadership team about. So what is the Office of Innovation? It's not a department. So we did that purposely because we don't want it to be a department's responsibility for performance excellence. It's the entire organization. And so it's a virtual office of about 300 employees, which is all of our employees. Everybody's got a stake in this. So again, it's everybody's responsibility. It's actually just staffed by a part-time person in Mr. Garcia because he has other responsibilities as well. So this first statement under purpose, it's about leveraging our greatest resource, our employees. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, we're never going to have enough money to do all the things that we really need to do. And technology is just going to take us so far. So the game changer is our employees, investing in our employees and maximizing their potential, empowering them, really having them take ownership in their jobs. So how are we going to do it? It's through education, process improvement, strategic and business planning, and creativity, which we're going to go into some detail in a moment. And so at the end of the day, what we do is we create this culture of innovation. Here's some of the tools that we're going to be using. Business planning. This is using the Baldrige framework to help us look at all aspects of the work that we do, and Guillermo's going to take a deep dive on that in a moment. City University is about learning, and you'll see some programming that we're doing with that. And Lean Six Sigma is about process improvement, eliminating waste and error from our processes. He'll give you some examples of some projects that he has done elsewhere that have made an impact. And then finally, strategic planning. This includes the business planning, but this will also integrate with your comprehensive plan. And so bringing it all together, and you'll see a diagram of that. And then down here at the bottom, we had a little contest when we had our open house for City University. We asked employees to vote on a motto for the City University, and so they came up with Dare to Learn, and you can see it there in Latin. So this last slide, and then I'll turn it over to Guillermo. You might ask yourself, well, what's all this about? What's the real impact of this? And because some of it might seem like a little bit of inside baseball, more of organizational, how we're driven and how we do our business. But really the purpose of all this is, as you can see here, to certainly reduce our future costs. If we eliminate waste in processes, that means you give people more time to do their jobs, which means you don't have to add more people sooner. You can do it later. And as we grow, we're going to have to add more people. So this is about maximizing the work that we do with the employees that we have. Improving efficiencies, increasing their capacity and productivity. This motivating and engaging a workforce is one of those things that is extremely powerful. And one of those byproducts that you don't really anticipate going in, but you start to see as people really get excited about being able to make a difference in their own department and with the city. And then I would add to this, it's not on the slide, improving customer service. Because if you're improving a process, then you're also improving the customer experience and improving quality of service. So better consistency in delivery of services, reduction of error in delivery of services, all those things you can expect to be achieved through what we're trying to do here. So it's not that we really have so many of these issues. The point is that even if you're best in class, you can always do better. And the minute you think you've arrived, that's the moment that you've gotten behind, because everybody else is moving too. And the world moves around you. Even if you don't want to move yourself or change yourself, change is coming. So how do we keep up with that? And how do we make sure that we stay on top of our game? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Guillermo, who's going to go through some of these components. Guillermo?
So good evening. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. So business planning is one of the major functions that we're going to implement, and we've already started the implementation of that function, the business planning itself. But one of the things, as we implement business planning is actually one of the major tool where we are going to integrate all of the strategies that we're developing throughout the organization. So the first thing when it comes to strategy implementation and strategy development is the comprehensive plan. That is the tool that you're already working on to get the voice of the customer, the voice of the citizen, and the voice of the council itself. Those are the things that we're interested in learning so that we can develop a comprehensive strategic plan. It's a strategic operating plan that allows us to really say, okay, this is how we're going to conduct that work, how we're going to achieve those goals. Most organizations, though, do the first two things very well. However, once you do those two things, it's that deployment, that integration into the organization that sometimes lacks. And that is where the business plan comes in. The business plan itself is that specific tool that we're going to utilize and leverage to integrate all those strategies, those tools, those actions, those measures to be able to accomplish great things. It's the way we challenge the departments to think strategically, but also operationally. How are we going to achieve those things? And that's why it's highlighted and it's bolded, because it's very important. The next thing you have is the employee evaluations, or the employees themselves. There's nothing more powerful than when you have an employee that knows their purpose, knows what their role is, and knows how they impact the strategy of the organization. Once that occurs, you will see that magical and great things will happen to this organization as we move forward. So the business plan itself is consistent of various items. You know, the main criteria or the main areas of the business plan are the strategic alignment. That's where we're aligning the organization, the department planning itself, and the performance criteria. And all this is an effort to create a culture of innovation, get people to think differently than what they were doing before. So in the next few slides I have an example of a business plan and some of the items within that business plan. As a matter of fact, Charvi is here and she can answer maybe some of the questions because this is her business plan that we have here. But the first portion of the business plan, this is one of the sections, is the commitment page. Okay? And in this commitment page, we're asking the department directors who own their business plans to make a commitment to the mission and the vision of the city of Kerrville. The next thing we're asking them is to understand the strategic focus areas. Those are the 3 E's, the engagement with citizens, economic opportunity, and empowerment of our employees. And also understand what the core values are, the standards, the tone, the expectation, and the pace. Because all those things are what's going to drive us and give us that purpose, the why we're trying to improve and make the city of Kerrville even better than it is today. The next section of the business plan is the strategic plan alignment area. This is where we're not asking them to do this now because we're still working on developing that strategic plan. We're working on the comprehensive plan. The business plan is the second part. We're asking the departments to start working on the business plan because that is going to be that internal environmental scan, as the comprehensive plan is the external environmental scan, and bringing those two together to develop a sound and fundamental strategic plan for the organization. And it's in here that we will locate those items in the business plan, and it'll be more of a strategy map that is presented to the organization, which is based off the balanced scorecard. And from that, in the page next to it, you will see that the various strategic actions or the strategic objectives that are assigned to each of those departments will be listed for them, and then all the various actions. So this is our way of also going back to the departments and evaluating how they're performing, holding them accountable to the actions that we're assigning them from that strategic plan. The next thing we have is the department planning area. Although this is not a formal strategic plan that we're asking the departments to engage in, we are asking them to utilize several strategic planning tools. And one of those tools is the SWOT analysis, where we're asking the departments to really reflect on themselves, identify what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what their opportunities and what their threats are. Those, in the end, will transfer over to becoming strategic objectives as they develop and they evaluate where their greatest needs are. Those strategic actions or the strategic objectives will be captured on the action portion of the business plan itself. They will have their strategic objective, and then they'll have all the various actions that they're engaging in to achieve that strategic objective. And you got to remember that all of it is tied together, because the strategic objectives tied to the city's strategic objectives, which then tied to the comprehensive plan itself. So it's all integrated and dispersed throughout the organization. And that does not include just the actions, but also includes the performance measures for the departments. We're asking those departments to really look at and evaluate their performance measures and evaluate how those performance measures actually impact the objectives that they're trying to accomplish. So we're challenging them to look at their performance measures in a different way. The next thing that we have on here is the performance criteria. This is where we will evaluate as well as ask the departments to self-evaluate how they're performing. And it's based off a criteria that we will evaluate them against. And I'll go into the criteria here a little bit more, but the criteria that we're using is based off the Baldrige framework, which was enacted into law in 1987 by President Reagan. And Governor Richards in the early 1990s, actually adopted the Baldrige framework and challenged the various entities within the state of Texas to perform better, to achieve the highest levels of performance excellence. So here are the criteria. The criteria consists of 7 categories. The categories, I won't go into each one individually, but I will highlight the specific items. When we ask leadership, we're asking from the perspective of how do we lead? How do we make decisions that impact the greater organization? Strategy is about how do we plan for the future? And if you'll notice, a lot of the statements I'm making is how. It's not what we do, but how do we do it? And so there's a thought process behind that. So customers, we're asking how do we listen to our customer, and how do we take that information and improve our organization? From a measurement, analysis, and knowledge management standpoint, we're asking how do we use our data? How do we evaluate if our organization is performing well? How do we share information within the organization as well as externally outside the organization? The workforce, how do we listen to our workforce? How do we take their information, their requirements, and make a better organization? Operationally, how do we develop? How do we manage? And how do we organize ourselves? How do we develop these processes that ultimately create value for our customers, in this case, our citizens? And the results is all about bringing it all together, providing results, allowing us to compare ourselves to other organizations or compare ourselves to our past performances so that we can say, are we truly getting better? Are our trends negative or are they positive? City University. City University is the educational arm of the Office of Innovation. This is where, as Mr. McDaniel communicated earlier, is that we're making that investment in the greatest resource engine that we have. And that resource engine is our employees. If you really think about it, if we go out and buy new equipment, if we go out and buy new buildings, what happens to those buildings? They continue to depreciate over time. The employee, however, is different because the employee can continue to learn. And so essentially continue to appreciate their value to the organization by the skills they acquire, the new techniques that they've acquired to make the organization better. So these are the 4 tracks that we've developed for the City University at this point in time. We have the standards, tone, expectations, and pace, or the STEP track. We have the technology track, the leadership track, and the innovation track. So the STEP track is designed to address basic training. These basic trainings can be many different things, but these are examples of the many courses that we've developed so far. So this weekend, or on Thursday and Friday, we will actually have two classes. One is the Habits of Success and the Get Things Done, which is a play on the 7 habits of highly successful people, giving the employees a direction and a purpose. The next one is the technology track, and in this track, this is about the technical expertise. In this case, on Monday, we had a class which was working with Excel, where we taught basic, intermediate, and advanced level training in Excel on how to use that specific tool. This is a picture of a class that actually Amy conducted at City University on the use of our enterprise system. And then we have our leadership track. And this leadership track is about encouraging our employees to learn new leadership skills and also to increase their capacity and capabilities to being better leaders. And so you see, these are some of the courses that we've been developing. And then lastly is innovation. Although this is a small cadre of courses, we're looking to expand on those courses, but the innovation track is really about challenging the individuals, challenging them on how they think now, getting them to look at things differently, assess things differently, so that ultimately we can achieve greater success in the organization. And this is a class that we held at City University in which we were learning about BAROODY. So these are some of the current results as of September 2017. These are accumulated training hours and accumulated training employees trained. But as you can see, just from the hours trained by track, you can see that so far 30 hours have been under the technology track and 120 hours under innovation. Again, this is accumulated training hours put together. And from an employee standpoint, employees can come more than one class. So they're already accumulating hours. You can see 30 hours in technology and a total of 38, I'm sorry, not hours, but employees, and 38 employees that have trained in innovation. And so in total, we've trained 58 employees out of the 312 that we have in the organization. And we're looking to increase that dramatically over the course of this fiscal year. So Lean Six Sigma. What is Lean Six Sigma? Well, Lean Six Sigma is a combination of two discipline approaches. It is the way we're going to attack and look for waste and variation in the organization. Waste leads to variation, and variation leads to waste. And it is through the tools that we're taught and we teach when we're teaching Lean Six Sigma, because we're using tools from lean manufacturing and Six Sigma that allows us to identify those wastes and those variation. So when I talk waste, these are the wastes that I'm talking about. And as a matter of fact, you can use the acronym Tim Woods to remember what these wastes are. So waste is transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects. So when we go into a process, we're looking for these specific items, and we're asking the question, why do these non-value added items exist in the process, and how can we eliminate them from the process? And then ultimately, how we make this happen is through the use of the Lean Six Sigma methodology, use of define, measure, analyze, and proving control. Through this mechanism, through this methodology, we're able to save and identify improvements to the organization itself. And so here are some here's some examples of the candidates that we have identified so far in our first wave, our first cadre of Greenbelts. These are their names and the departments that they represent. And we started, before I forget, we had our first week of training last week, and so this week we're about defining projects, identifying those opportunities so we can move forward with improving. These are some successful projects that I have been involved with. These are projects that can potentially be leveraged here within the city of Kerrville. Maybe not on a one-to-one basis, but it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, this is a starting point. This is something that we can think about as we move forward in identifying opportunities for the organization. Any questions?
How many can we go to?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I'm already signed up for one. How many can we attend?
Oh.
Really, how do you determine who goes to these classes? How is that done?
Go ahead.
So are we talking about the classes for City University or Lean Six Sigma?
Well, City University.
Okay, so City University is an open registration. And so what ends up happening is that the individual, we market the class, the individual sees that the class is available, they apply through a website that we have where they go in to register for the class. that then generates an email. It generates 2 emails. The first one is to myself, and the second one is to their supervisor, asking for permission to go to the class. And that's so that sometimes you're looking at the status of the department at that point in time, or something that's occurring that might say, you know what, we can't send you to this class now, but we're offering the class later down the road that you can go to that one. But it gives the supervisor an opportunity to say, yes, I want you to go to that class, or you know what, priorities are taking precedence, so we have to do certain things. And then lastly, they have finally approved who's going to come to the class, and then I just register them and conduct the training as we go forward. And for Lean Six Sigma, that's a whole different process, because for Lean Six Sigma, we're asking them to actually fill out an application, and through that application, we evaluate it at the Senior Executive Committee and decide who's going to be part of the group. So it's not an open registration for that.
So no part of this is mandatory, is what I'm.
No, ma'am.
But it can be very helpful if we have a performance issue with an employee. We have resources that we can make available to them. But it's not, the only one that's mandatory, Mayor, would be the onboarding. So it used to be called new employee orientation. Now we'll have a complete curriculum around onboarding and spending more time with that employee as they come to work for us.
Because especially in inventory and waste, it seems like that somebody from every department needs to get that down and be able to translate that
Absolutely.
through the department.
Most of the classes are how long in each duration?
They vary in duration, but ideally we're trying to keep the classes under 3 hours. But there's a combination. There's certain classes that are 4, like the Lean Six Sigma classes are definitely 4 hours, but that's dedicated. But most of the classes are anywhere from 3 to 1 hour.
Okay, but they get it all in that one class?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I haven't seen anything in here about anybody from Parks and Recreation.
Well,
did I miss it somewhere?
I saw Scott in there in the class.
Did you?
On Lean Six Sigma, I think he's talking about.
yeah, for the list is Lean Six Sigma. So at this point in time, we don't. But the great thing about it is that we're continually offering Lean Six Sigma training,
Okay.
and so we'll have additional opportunities for them to actually send an individual for training.
And the Lean Six Sigma curriculum is actually working on a real world problem.
Yes, ma'am.
And solving it.
Yes, ma'am.
With the help of, is it like all these people meet together and brainstorm things, or do they just work with you one-on-one?
No. So we require every project to have team members attached to their project. And the reason we do that is because a lot of times, even though that individual, the greenbelts themselves, we're asking them to work on projects within their department, within their normal job functions, there's other people that are involved in those processes. And so sometimes having those outside voices help to identify opportunities for improvement and to identify solutions as well.
Are you finding much pushback on, you mentioned, is your supervisor going to be allowing you because you're currently putting out fires over here? Are you able to get past that where they realize that this helps them to prevent the fires instead of putting them out all the time?
I think so, because what you find is not only just first line employees are coming, but supervisors are coming as well. And so as they join and participate in the classes, they'll see the benefit for not only for themselves, but for their employees.
Okay. And just for the record, I know it was just an example, but I'd like to point out that I fully support the first opportunity that Charvy had in her business plan. It's something I've talked to her about before, which is a citywide Wi-Fi. I'd like her to keep pushing forward with that as best she can. So, anyways.
Well, I think I talked with Mr. McDaniel once before, and we can expect to see the results of this like day after tomorrow, right?
Sure. We will try our hardest.
I think some of it may take, as you said, years, but others, it's a start right now, which is a great thing.
Right. We're building capacity now, and usually I'm telling the employees that I'm not expecting all this overnight, particularly with the business planning, because it's a lot of work. Once you have it done, it's easy to change it and update it. But I told them not to expect it to be really well put together until probably a 2-year period. But we'll be looking at them and evaluating and scoring them twice a year, and we'll have some practice runs. But we want people to get really comfortable with it and understand it's a tool for them. It's not a paperwork exercise. So we're not going to rush through this. We're just building capacity.
Are the projects that they're coming up with them coming up with them. Like they're just kind of viewing their own department and saying, here's something we could do better, and then
Yeah.
just work up a plan for it.
Yes, sir. So what ends up happening is that the employee, we're empowering them, we're encouraging them to identify opportunities within their workspace. Then we'll ask them to collect some data so that we can evaluate, is there really a problem there in that location? And then if there is, we basically roll that up. The next presentation we have for that is for that department director or the executive in that department, so that we can basically flesh out the project, or maybe change direction or change the scope of the project depending on what we're trying to do. And then lastly, that charter, because we're going to create a charter for each of these projects, will get rolled up into the senior executive team, and that's where the director or the executive director will present that project to the team for discussion, and then ultimately have the sign off of Mr. McDaniel to give his full support of the project.
Okay. Good.
Any other questions or comments? We sure appreciate all your work. Mr. McDaniel said
Absolutely.
you just pedal really hard out there, so I believe that you do. We appreciate it. Thank you for
We're
the
trying.
presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Item number 7B is budget and economic update. Ms. Yarbrough.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a September. Oh, it's in the box. I'm sorry, didn't see it. This is the financial reports from September 30, and I want to, before I start this, tell you the budget amendments y'all approved tonight are not in these numbers.
No,
Okay.
okay.
They are not.
Okay, okay. So we won't
This-
be quite as far over 100%
Right.
on some of these
Yeah.
numbers. Okay.
In the general fund, the monthly activity of revenues was $1,466,949. The year-to-date was $28,072,527. Expenditures in the general fund was $2,673,424, with the year-to-date of being $27,630,066. In the water sewer fund, the revenue for the month was $1,138,594, with the year-to-date of being $11,881,558. The expenditures was $1,109,152, with year-to-date of being $11,230,342. Hotel motel fund, we had $90,208 for the month, with our year-to-date of being $1,225,145, and no expenditures for the month. In the next section, under the community investment plan, those are your most current active projects, giving your project budget, the month's activity, the project-to-date expense, and your remaining project balances. In the bottom section, your development activities, we had 8 new residents for the month, and we had $8,635,950 in new construction and improvements in the commercial side. The housing inventory remains steady and staying in line with what they've been about all year, and they seem to think they're going to continue. The unemployment is staying relatively low, and our utility accounts are growing about 0.5% on a monthly basis.
Ms. Yarbrough, just a simple question. Water, I don't know why I've never asked this before, but on the residential units, we have 11,000 customers, and the garbage, we only have 8,000. Do we have that?
Apartment houses, if there's over 4 units, is a commercial garbage.
So they're
So
considered
these
separate.
are up to quad
I got
products, yes.
Because they're all metered separately on the
And
water.
this 11,000 includes, apartment houses, things of that nature. There's not actually that many water accounts. They're just multi-units that's added to that.
It's a question I'd never asked before. Okay. Any other questions or comments by council? If not, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
we will, I'm sorry. Did you have a question? Brenda? I thought she
Yep.
said something. Item number 8A is city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. So today I just wanted to cover the subcommittee appointment process for the comprehensive planning effort that's underway. It's now time to really get started on appointing these subcommittees, and I know that several of you are already hard at work in doing that. Just for the public's interest, I wanted to outline our process. So the council will submit 2 names for each of the 7 subcommittees or plan components. Those would be economic development, community neighborhood character and placemaking. The third would be mobility or transportation. The fourth would be water, wastewater, and drainage. Fifth, public facilities and services, and I have gotten some questions about what that might include. That could include a public safety building or a library, or the actual services themselves. But anything would be open there as far as city services. The river corridor, parks and open space, and then downtown revitalization. So that's 7 so far. When we get through the community retreat, there may be a lot of attention around another subject matter that we want to pull out and highlight and perhaps establish another subcommittee, but that will be your call when we get to that point. So we're going to plan to have this on your agenda for November 14th for the appointments, and those appointments would need to come from the community, including people that live outside of Kerrville, if you so choose, but not from the steering committee itself. So we want to maximize the involvement of the public, so that's why we're asking for additional individuals. And so the chair for each of those groups, though, would come from the steering committee. And the reason for that is that we anticipate that these groups would meet probably 3, maximum 4 times between November and April. They'd be looking at principles around goals, essentially around their chapters or their components, and then some items for implementation, and then making that recommendation back to the steering committee. So as they meet, and as the steering committee meets in between, the chairs will be reporting out to the full to steering committee about what happened, where they are, what's going on, and so forth. So y'all would be appointing then the really 11 people to each committee, because it's 2 for each of you plus the chair. And so staff will prepare all that for your consideration on November 14th.
How are we going to select the chairs?
I might make some recommendations in that regard. If you all have some suggestions, then please let me know. I'll make a recommendation.
Okay, you
Mayor?
said the steering committee would make up, you meant council or steering committee? For the chairs?
You all would.
The council?
Yes.
Okay, because you said steering committee.
No,
We
we wouldn't chair them all.
No, I understand. It said I would recommend the chair be whomever is appointed from the steering committee.
Oh, yeah, what I meant is that they come from the steering committee, but you all actually make the appointment. Yes.
But you don't want the members to be from the steering committee?
Right.
You said.
Right, because we want to maximize, except for the one person that you all appoint as chair.
Are we going to be expected to name those chairs at the November meeting, or is that going to, how is that going to work?
That would be ideal, because we want to get started on that meeting pretty shortly after that.
So the recommendations you're talking about will just come from us talking with you, or how will we? Okay, all right.
All right, any questions or comments? We're all working on that diligently, I'm sure. And item number 9, is that all you had, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Item number 9 is any item for future agenda? Does
I
anybody
have one.
Okay.
Mayor, I want to make sure that we move forward expeditiously with the evaluation of the city attorney. And I wonder if we could agree to let Kim design a questionnaire for the kind of 360 thing that we suggested. Maybe send that plan to all of us, let her know whether we have other suggestions so that we're ready to do it at the next meeting. Or do you guys feel like we need a meeting where we talk about the process before we actually do it?
I think she sent us several ideas.
She has, she has. And I'm thinking that by just individually talking to her, we could tweak that enough so that we could do it at the November meeting.
I agree.
And then it would be done. So that would be my agenda item.
Okay.
If you think we can work it.
And I know y'all have been out of town, but we spoke about getting together. Would also need to formulate how we do the legal service for our plan. Okay. And that could be on there too. Yeah, I don't know why not. I think if we could tell Kim, there was one that I looked at I thought was helpful. And I think we could suggest to her what we thought was good.
I think questions to be considered are what instrument, what kind of questionnaire we use, and who fills it out. And I just suggest we start with the executive team, which is 8 or 10 people.
Right. Just something to be thinking about is typically when you change an evaluation process, it's prospective, so that the person that's being evaluated knows what they're being evaluated on, and it's not retrospective. So that's something to just kind of give some thought to, even if it's a 360 evaluation. But
That we would just put it in place but not actually do it this year?
Right.
So what would we do this year?
Well,
Fall back on the old one?
probably.
And in speaking with Ms. Meismer, she said that she checked with a number, well, I mean, we're not discussing this, I know it's not on the agenda, but to decide what we do.
To decide what we're going to put on the agenda.
Yeah, she said a lot of cities don't have any at all. She checked about 60 or
Right.
a lot of them, they don't at all.
And some cities will actually hire somebody to come in and do the 360 evaluation and facilitate it, do interviews and so forth.
Well, then maybe there's not any big rush on that, and we could just,
On the form.
just fall back on whatever each of us thinks is an appropriate preparation, but just put it on the agenda for next time.
Assuming we can have everything else done, yeah, I think that'll be fine. Okay. All right, any other items for future agenda?
I don't have a future agenda, but is this an okay place to ask a question?
Well, it depends.
It's about basically the street destruction that's occurring on Legion Drive due to the reuse ponds, I guess. Is there an end in sight to that particular stretch of road being torn up?
Yes, sir. I don't have the exact details of it, but it's progressing. They're hopeful. I think we're hopeful that most of the distribution segments on the north side of the river will be done in the next couple months.
Okay, because both the road itself, people drive on the wrong side to avoid the dug up stuff for months. But then the barricades that are at Legion and the Loop, that makes that intersection really dangerous right now.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
Okay, any other items?
It's a future thought, it's not a future agenda item. As we extend the river trail, as a bicyclist, if there's a way for us to, instead of having those really rough rocks that they put around the high traffic zones, if they could get maybe rumble strips that don't tear up bicycle tires so much, and do that, not in the old ones, but as we stretch the river trail, just consider that. Anyways, all right, that's all.
We'll email those.
There you go.
Okay. All right, that having been said, item number 10, there's no executive session, so we are adjourned at 7:13.